The chat's making me go live early. Okay. I put my typical hey, pinned message in the chat. Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. Please drop your questions or whatever. And I did that at around 6 o'clock. And I sit down right now and the chat is popping off. You know what I mean? We've got Channel All-Stars in there. We've got September and June, Srivas Nunez. I mean, we've got Leave Your Sword. We've got Spunding und Wirt. I mean, what else do you want, man? What else do you want for entertainment on a Tuesday in June? Okay. What else do you want other than a fine of group individuals like this? We got DJ Lasnovsky in the house. Welcome, man. Is that like DJ as in like David John or DJ as in like DJ? Let me know. Bobby F in here. What's up, man? This is just a bonus time right now before we get rolling with the whole thing. Donald John, welcome to the chat, man. Good to see you. Wiki, boy. The gang is here, man. The gang is here. Hopefully, everything's looking right, sounding right. It's June, ladies and gentlemen. And when it's the beginning of June, it is time for the June live stream Q&A podcast. Welcome to the Adam Makes Beer podcast and YouTube channel. Check out Spotify, Apple Podcast, and see all the long-form brewer interviews we've done. After you subscribe, please leave a review and comment as well, because it really helps support the work that I am doing. Also, if you are new to the channel or podcast, go to Adam Makes Beer on YouTube, click the playlist tab, and see tons of info, brew days, techniques, tutorials, in-brewery content, ladies and gentlemen. Now over 768 videos posted. As always, if you are getting value out of the content, please follow, rate, like, comment, and share with your brewing friends and craft beer enthusiast homies. And if you have the means and feel as if my content has benefited you, please consider a channel membership for $2.99 a month. That'll get you priority for Q&A live streams and maybe a quarterly merch drawing. I've ran into some hiccups with the merch store. I'm not gonna lie. So I believe Cowboy Brewer, I still owe you a shirt from the last merch drop. I apologize, the last merch drawing, but the reality is I was this is gonna sound pathetic, but I was getting so few purchases through the store that they put a hold on my credit card, because they didn't want my credit card just available for hacking with no transactions happening. So anyways, I need to go back and fix that and get that rolling again. But yeah, Cowboy Brewer, you are not forgotten. And I will hook you up with that. And so, yeah, maybe I can get that rolling again. Things have been busy. Also, June's Industry Pro live stream is going to be Wednesday, June 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with guest Tom Miller from Blickman Engineering. We're going to be talking a whole bunch of different stuff. I've met Tom a few times. He's a character. He's a funny dude. He definitely lets you know what he thinks about something. He's a straight shooter. And obviously he's in the equipment side of things. And we're going to be diving into some stuff like that. I've kind of realized that kind of organically, I've got a lot of guests coming up or people I've been talking to that would kind of fit very well into a, owning your own place type thing, like a primer for that. I'm probably going to be talking with the great and powerful David Lentz, accountant extraordinaire, specializing in breweries. I'm probably gonna be talking with him. I forget his business name right off the top, but he offers some services for breweries on the accounting side. I'm going to be talking with Tom, obviously there on the equipment side there at Blickman. I think I might be talking with Rich Hennessy, who does a bunch of stuff on opening your own place with like a Frankenbrew type setup. So we're going to get different perspectives. You know what I mean? I'm going to have one guy that's going to tell you dairy equipment. I'm going to have another guy that's going to talk to you about the pluses and minuses of buying new, because we do it all, baby. We do it all. It's like a diamond in here. It's just nothing but facets, angles. This is what you come here for. I know. But on June 12th at 7, Tom Miller from Blickman, we're going to be getting in there, talking equipment. And yeah, we're going to see. I think we have some cool stuff coming up. Speaking of cool stuff, that reminds me of my good friends at Blickman Engineering. Blickman Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams since they started with one-barrel systems in 2006. Now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15-barrel skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more sized specifically for the nano brewer. Blickman Pro brewing systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality, and the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts gets you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into a reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at ProSeries@BlickmanEngineering.com. Again, that's ProSeries@BlickmanEngineering.com. Blickman Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. Ladies and gentlemen, do you hear that? Do you hear that sound? That's the sound you hear when it's time for the June Career Corner. There's no, I don't have audio. I don't have, there's nothing. Before I get into the Career Corner, though, look, I mean, it's stacking up in here. We got Metalhead Brewing Company in here. The boys are chopping it up. Is the audio choppy? September. Big equipment guy. I tell you what, man. It won't be Mr. Blickman. It will be, a representative of the company. But I feel like good. Sometimes I feel like there is I know that there's an intense love radiating out of September and June, like in my general direction. But the one small way he wants to see me fail is he loves teasing me, telling him my audio is not working right. It doesn't stress me out as much as it used to. It doesn't stress me out as much as it used to. But listen, man, June Career Corner. So we've kind of talked about just wanting to dip into things a little bit before we got into the Q&A. One of the things I really want to be doing with the channel is looking at things through a career lens. I know a lot of you that listen are already on the pro side. Some of you are looking at doing it, opening your own place, getting into the industry. Some of you are folks that just are making beer for the love of it, right? On the amateur side, on the homebrew side. And you're just here for the information and the razor sharp wit. But I like to talk the career side stuff too, and kind of, because I think it's one thing to have a channel where you're just talking, facts and content and whatever. And I think it's important to kind of share some of my work journey with you as well, because I think it can give some perspective. I was just talking to a dear friend of mine, an industry friend, and we all have our peaks and valleys, whether it be work or you know uh you know family situations or this, that, and the other. And we were just sorting it out the other night, kind of talking about a work situation, the pluses and minuses of it. And ultimately, and it might sound corny, I think sometimes we always think that career is just supposed to be this rocket ship, right? Or like always ascending. And the reality is maybe it can be a winding path, you know some hills and valleys in there. You reach a certain height, and then you realize, and then you think, man, it's all up from here, but then that path runs low again. So that's part of the reason why I like to share some of this stuff. And so anyways, for me, for this past month, I've been digging into some stuff that I am not comfortable doing at work. One of them is getting into schedule writing. So like the daily tasks. As of right now, our lead brewer Austin does all of the weekly scheduling. So there's the master calendar that Chase writes, and then Austin will write the daily schedule off of that with individual tasks for the various brewers to attack throughout the day. Attack was a very aggressive way, to put that. And I feel like I'm getting to the point where I understand the workflow enough. Like I'm not like stuck in the weeds trying to learn the different equipment and processes anymore. And so I'm dipping my toes into that end of it. And I think it's going to be really good for me. We're kind of doing training wheels at this point. What I did is I broke down all of the individual days of next week, and then all the tasks that needed to be done based on, the production schedule. And then Austin's going to help me find my blind spots in it. And then we're going to work through how to assign that to different people. What days, might be kind of more on a time crunch, and how to work around those things. So that's all cool. It's something that is outside of my comfort zone, and it's one of the reasons that I said, hey, it's time for me to get after this. I always knew I needed to do it, but I was kind of at a point where, I feel as if I'm helpful on the floor, because I do have a split role between management and floor work. I feel as if my competency is high enough on the floor to where I'm getting a little faster, and I have more time on the management side. And it's time for me to start ticking off some things like that. So that's been a good challenge. I'm looking forward to that. One of the other things that has been, it's been on my mind a lot. 2024 has been a year where I've really been trying to figure out what the channel is going to be. I've had some folks on the marketing side of things tell me that, I call this a side hustle. And I've had some people that are, on the marketing side of things that are saying, what you're doing doesn't count as a side hustle. You release, 365 videos a year, blah, 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 blah. And now granted, I have help without the amazing Andy. I would not be able to do the stuff that I'm doing. But I was really focused on, all right, so how can I maybe get advertisers or different things like that? And I was really thinking about it. It's like, all right, so I'm producing this content. Is there a way that I can make my personal budget, like at the house with the family, like give us a little more breathing room, right? I think that's sometimes people are upset when you say things like that. Hopefully you're not. With the idea that somebody that creates content, I understand that this is like a free will thing that I'm doing. I understood that end of the contract when I was getting into it, but you do hope to build some sort of value for yourself at some point. And so I've really been struggling with that this past year, and it's been kind of a source of stress. And I don't know, over the last couple of weeks, I think I've just really embraced the idea. So I was talking about doing specialized content behind a paywall. I don't think I'm going to do that. And, I mean, I guess it's not written in stone. You never know what's going to happen. But I think that the goal, uh, I think my primary goal for the channel is still going to be because people shared information with me. My primary goal is I want to stay sharing information. If I do get to a point where I have the time to do like, a recipe writing, like quote unquote masterclass type concept, right? That's just something I would do and release, you know. And I don't know, looking at it like that is actually a little bit freeing for me. And it's kind of taken some stress off. I'm a person that puts a lot of stress on myself, right? And so I don't know. Overall, it's been a pretty healthy move. Um, and yeah, I think by and large that's June's career corner. Everybody, I hope everybody's doing well out there. Again, the chat is bumping. Yeah, and Srivas mentions I'd like to not be excluded from the for the love of it category, please, whilst also being included on the pro side. And dude, I mean, Srivas, I think you have a real point there, man. I think if you want to, if the goal is to be great, right? And not to like win or like, but I don't know, like if the goal is just, you know, to get better, improve, I think the love of it has to be the thing that drives you, right? Because obviously amateur is for the love of, right? And yeah, I mean, hopefully there's even for those of us that are on the pro side, hopefully there is that amat, right? That I don't know. Hopefully that love, man. Hopefully that is what keeps us grinding and wants to keep us getting better. Sindri, and pardon me if I pronounced that poorly. I probably did. Sindri Frostisan. I don't believe Frostisan. I don't believe I've seen that name before. But I'll hit up these questions real quick for you. What's my favorite beer style to brew? I don't know. For me, I love brewing really gently flavored beers. I love brewing light lager because it's a challenge, and I love brewing new things and trying new concepts, new ideas. So those are the things that keep me hungry. Honestly, I prefer those things. I prefer that over the beer itself. I do. I just love. I love the discipline of what we do. Now, I mean, I love a good lager. More often than not, I would prefer to go, Helles Pils, something like that. I like the newer style, like Italian Pils, like the dry hop Pils. I can do hazy IPA from time to time, but I probably more prefer like a more modern spin, like a really pale West Coast IPA. But then again, I love it all just because I love the discipline and I love the history, right, and the tradition. So it's a little bit of a non-answer, but yeah, I always want to get to the bottom of whatever beer that I'm drinking, not just like to the bottom of the pint, but like I want to break it down and understand it. It's one of the reasons that like when I was drinking more often, because I don't drink a lot of beer these days, when I was drinking more often, I always prefer to have beers with other people, because like the whole conversation doesn't have to be about the beer, but I want to be able to talk about the beer too, right? So yeah. Let's take a question from a man, DJ. DJ's in the chat. DJ says, when you carb your beer through a carb stone in a 5-barrel vessel, what's your rule of thumb for PSI at the stone and for how long? Also, is there PSI loss to get through the carb stone? I think so. I think the terminology you're looking for right there, DJ, is wetting pressure. And it is the amount of pressure that you need to put on a stone, on a carb stone, in order to get gas through it. Okay. For me, a lot of carb stones that I've used, it's about 5 psi. So if I wanted my tank to settle out to, say I have the tank at 0 degrees Celsius or 30 degrees, 31 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever. And so for a standard carb beer, I'm probably going to want it near 12 psi or 10 psi really for the 2.5 range, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower. What I always did was I would get the beer transferred into the tank, and then for me, I knew at the coldest setting on my bright tank, if that tank were to settle out at 10 psi, I would be in good shape. And so I would take that 10 plus the wetting pressure of the stone, which was 5. So I'd put it on 15 psi and hook it up through the carb stone. And then I would start I would slowly crack open my valve, and I would have a little check valve in there that only lets gas go in and not liquid come out. And you could hear it start going. So it's just kind of hissing through there. That's what I would do. And then I would leave that hooked up overnight. And then when I came in the morning, it was usually at 10 or 11 psi, and you were good to roll. So that was what I did with it. I've also done a little bit more of a bleeded feed where you're kind of, ripping gas in through the carb stone and pushing the pressure up. I'm not as big on that. I like to be as gentle as I can. But yeah. Also, I would encourage you, DJ, to on that bright tank, on that beer before you get it into the bright, when you have that beer crashed and cold in the fermenter, I'm assuming your tanks are rated to 15 psi. Every morning, be bumping those things up to 15, right? And then in the morning, it'll eat that CO2 and bump it back up. Push that up on the fermenter side as much as you can as you're allowing that beer to clear, right? And then you can have more gas ultimately in that beer with a gentle transfer, right? So if you're at 15 psi in your fermenter, have your bright tank be at 12 to 13 psi for your transfer, so it's nice and gentle. You're not just slamming it in there. You'll hold on to more carbonation. You'll maintain better foam and everything like that. So that would be my take on it, DJ, and I appreciate the question. Oh, you actually pronounce. Oh, awesome, man. Well, you didn't have to mention that I probably butchered your last name. So, well, you always try to do like, I don't know. I'm always concerned because it always blows my mind that, when you do something on YouTube, you can have an international audience, right? People from all over the place. And there's some small part of me that always thinks it's just people from Ohio, where I live, that potentially listen, right? But you never want to come across as disrespectful or anything like that, because I know I'm not gonna nail all those names. So I'm glad I got the first name right. Leave your sword. I'm on the pro side. The question of sharing, what to share, asking money for is always a big question mark. If we can share educational and solid content for free, it's good, as long as it doesn't bring anxiety, of course. Sure, man. And that's really the deal. I do think overall, doing the channel has been a positive for me. It's given me access to people and to conversations that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And I think it's just something I'm going to stay patient with and kind of keep doing it like with like the right mindset, right? Like giving joyfully, right? And then seeing what comes down the line. So Srivas, he says, Adam, you need to visit me. I just hit 6 taps at the new brew pub. Hellas, West Coast Pills, American Pale, Mexican Amber Lager, New Zealand Hazy Pills, West Coast Dip Hop IPA. Yeah, I mean you have my lineup of beer right there. I love it. September, I was this close to saying, like, because I think it's 0.85 bar. Don't push me to bar, okay? Because I will. September has a couple of questions. DJ, you're welcome, brother. I'm so excited to see you in the chat. How dare you? September asked a question earlier. I'm going to jump back to it and then jump to what you just said, September. So let's see here. He said, this is from September and June. I've got a question for you. Adam makes me all hot and bothered. The first time anybody's ever said that. Considering most kegs are only cleaned with a caustic and maybe an acid, why or why not would you finish a tank on the cold side with a sanitizer like peracetic acid? If there's a chance for oxidation with them, when is sanitation ever really ever a must do? So this is interesting. And then he follows it up down here with, so Adam, why use an oxidizing sanitizer? Goodness. An oxidizing sanitizer on the cold side if there's a chance for oxidized character? You need to do caustic on kegs. Is sanitizing needed? So this is a really interesting question because, you know, I know there's places out there that do different things. So I know that if I run a full caustic and then consequently acid cycle on a fermenter, I can swab that and it will read 0. Okay, so that means it's clean, and good for product. Now, I know that if I am going to clean and seal or like button up a tank or like seal up a tank for next day's use, whether it be a fermenter or a bright tank, I will run caustic, acid, peracetic acid, and then I will put 5 psi on that tank of CO2 pressure. And then I will blow out that tank with the idea of it being dry the next morning. I was thinking about, you know, at Sonder, we use steam on the cold side. So we have a caustic wash, rinse, steam sanitize. And obviously heat's going to take care of everything in that situation, right? And believe me, that thing is blazing hot when it's coming off of there. So, you know, it's left me thinking if you're in a situation where you don't have steam sanitized kegs, which is most of us out there, there's a part of me that, yeah, I mean, I want the sanitizer in there. It's still a little bit difficult for me to be cleaning a tank and have the 0 reading and then run into that, even though, like, when you look at here's the book, and I actually need to look up some things in this, so I need to take this out. I mean, you'll see that in the Master Brewers Association Brewery Cleaning Equipment Procedures and Troubleshooting by Richard J. Wrench. Cool book. A lot of technical stuff in it. Good stuff and practical. Good stuff. But it's still a little bit of a hurdle for me. So one of the things I was thinking of is if I was in a situation where I had to use chemical sanitizer, I would probably, and this, you can say I'm crazy. What I used to do was I used to take kegs and then blow them out before I filled them. So I would take a keg coupler, and you could put a valve on each side or just cap one side and the out. But then I would engage it on a keg and then cover it with my hand and open up the out valve, and it would blast out kind of some residual peracetic that was in there. That's one thing to do. I would be really tempted if you're on the smaller pub side and had a little bit more time to fiddle, I would be tempted to wash those kegs, caustic acid, paracetic, whatever, but get it through your paracetic. Have them go upside down. If there's room in your cold room, I love to store them in the cold room. But then I was thinking about a way of like maybe leaving them upside down, and then having like a workspace to put them up and like blow them down a little bit to blast anything that collected in like the top of the spear, basically upside when the keg's upside down. I don't know. I'm thinking it out, but I understand your concern. For me personally, you do want to take whatever measures you can to make sure that oxidizer is getting out of your keg 100%. Something that's always important is to be hitting an appropriate range for your chemical titration with that stuff. You don't want to just be blasting, straight, vinegar into that thing. And, I don't know, make sure. And if it makes you feel a little bit better, be like in the lower portion, maybe the lower 25% of the acceptable range for that chemical, if that makes you feel better about it a little bit. So you're still in the sanitizing range, but you're not crazy intense either. But think about ways to blast that out. But I'm increasingly, the more I think about just like production in general, I'm more and more a fan of the idea of, say you have, you're gonna brew 3 days in a row, and you have 3 clean fermenters, and you could just turn paracetic on all 3 of them and button them up, and then you have, the next day is 1, 2, and then 3, and you can brew 3 days, because that's kind of the rule of thumb that we use. We'll give it a 3-day window, sealed with paracetic. But yeah, I think there's some interesting options there, but I would chase that idea of, all right, so can I do a thing? Can I have a situation where I can sanitize a tank the day ahead of time, get some pressure on it, potentially purge it if it needs to be purged? I don't know what kind of vessel it is, whether it's bright tank or fermenter. And then, prior to filling, next morning, go in and blast that thing out the bottom. You're probably going to have a dry surface inside, which is going to be much more what you want to be having in that scenario. So that's my take on it, September. I hope there's something valuable in there. September says, I've stopped using paracetic post-fermentation, kegs, etc. It doesn't make sense to me to have the possibility for no reason. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It would obviously, if you're, it makes me nervous. It feels like a leap. I get where you're coming from with it. There's part of me that wonders, maybe what about like an appropriately mixed iodine solution? Because I don't believe that's going to oxidize. I don't believe that does its thing in an oxidizing fashion. I could be super wrong. So you're welcome, boyfriend. Man, we got the best people in the chat. I don't care what anybody says. Like, people are commenting on the people in the Adam Makes Beer chat. Srivis says, anyone using KPA? Srivis, drop what KPA is in there, and let me know. I don't have time to Google it. But this leads us to our first pre-typed question tonight, and this is from Jamie on YouTube. I know oxygen is important for my yeast health. I know some people use sterile filtered air and some people use pure O2. What are your thoughts? Well, that's a great question, Jamie. Listen, I'm going part coffee. I got coffee. Oh, I got coffee over here. I got carbonated water over here. You know what I mean? I got the cup with my grill. I got the, it's a hydration game. I'm interested to know how many, if I took the transcript and turned it into like a double space Times New Roman 12 point font paper, like how many pages one of these nonsensical riffs that I do a couple times a month are. But I get thirsty. Okay. I get thirsty. But Jamie, I love this question. And I think there's some important things to think about. Oxygen is a key component and a key manipulator in getting various expressions out of your yeast strains. Okay. Now there's multiple levers and dials to be turned, tweaked, and otherwise. But the volume of oxygen that the yeast is given is an important one. Okay. So let's dip into this. In order to do that, I pulled some stuff off the Escarpment Labs, a great yeast lab up in Canada. I pulled some stuff off of their website, and I wanted to share it with you and kind of chat through it on this issue or this topic of oxygenating cold wort on the way to the fermenter. So Escarpment, this is from Escarpment. Why do I need pure oxygen? Their answer is, while some yeasts are happy with the dissolved oxygen you can get from air, they say that's about 6 ppm max. I've heard maybe up to 8, but listen, they're the yeast lab. I'll take their word for it. Many yeast strains require more than that 6 ppm. Using pure oxygen delivered by a sintered stone is the best way to ensure appropriate levels of oxygen for optimal yeast health. Now, this should be dialed in by using like an appropriate, and I think that's like a medical grade, like flow rate oxygen regulator. You can turn the little dial and have a little float ball that will show you how many liters per minute you're doing. So yeah, that's kind of how you want to be able to dose that out. Have some way of actually measuring the flow rate, right? They continue. What impact does temperature have on this whole getting oxygen into solution? Oxygen is more like CO2. Oxygen is more soluble at lower wort temperatures. As a result, if you are pitching hot with Kveik or Saison yeast, we suggest bumping up your oxygen flow rate to compensate. Okay, so does that make sense? So if you're expecting to get, we'll just say for argument's sake, and this is just to have numbers. If you want to get 6 ppm into that beer, you're going to need to increase the flow rate. If you're knocking out at 90 degrees Fahrenheit for a Saison or for Kveik, or 50 degrees Fahrenheit for a lager. For that lager, that gas is going to go much more readily into solution than it will in that warmer beer, right? It's just like with CO2. If you're trying to carb a warm beer, you're going to have a hard time with it. So those are some of the big takeaways, and I really like that. But continuing with what Escarpment says, we sometimes see breweries experience more fermentations in the cold winter season. One possible explanation is that cooler groundwater means a faster knockout and transfer, with the inverse effect on dissolved oxygen. We suggested brewers reducing the flow rate of cooling water so that the cool out times are consistent throughout the year if possible, to avoid introducing another variable into the brew house. Now, I have to think that this is going to be between 40 and 50 feet. For a lot of you, this won't be like an issue. But I was listening to a Master Brewers podcast, and they were kind of talking about these issues. And they were saying that you want probably, I think it was like 40 to 50 feet, but I think it was at least 40 feet between the exit of your heat exchanger and your fermenter, because usually your O2 stone is just on the other side of the, that's on the outside of the heat exchanger. So it actually needs that contact time. Those bubbles actually need that contact time with the wort as it travels through the hosing to get to your fermenter, because otherwise, if it doesn't have that contact time, it doesn't as readily dissolve. So this is the interesting thing where they're saying that they find that people have oxygen-derived fermentation issues, or they find that they're getting under-oxygenated wort in colder months when their groundwater is so much colder and they can knock out 30% faster, right? So by speeding up the knockout, you're not getting that O2 saturation into your wort, right? So there's multiple factors here, and that's just one thing that I would like to encourage you to think on. Another small thing is, as much as you can, try to create a situation when you're spinning your heat exchanger, when you're cleaning your heat exchanger, try to figure out some way to be able to connect off of your CO2 stone, maybe with, whatever your connection point, if it's a barb or a quick connect or whatever, get a connection off of that and some line, some brewery line, some tubing, and run that down, and then make sure you're cracking that when you're circulating your heat exchanger, so you get some flow through that O2 stone. That's not something it's a great area to be building up infection, right? So some love to my people at Escarpment. Love their website, man. Check out their information. They have some good stuff. So check them out. And appreciate the question. The chat. What is going about? You say yes, we get 0 after acid, correct. KPA is kilopascal. Have mercy. I don't know what that is, bro. I mean, obviously it's 1,000 pascals, but man, I'm not up on that PA, boy. Decaf or leaded coffee? Are you talking about what am I? Oh, yeah, it is. This is half calf. This is half calf. This is my wife's special combination of. It's a mix of hazelnut beans and decaf beans. And so it's half calf. Twice as much coffee. You know what I mean? Because I just love coffee for the. I love it for the taste. I'm in it for the game. You know what I mean? For the sensory experience. I mean, caffeine doesn't hurt, but I feel like sometimes caffeine gets in the way more than anything else. Yes. Yeah. Have you ever really heard of someone altering their oxygen levels other than HEF to achieve different results? If so, who, and do you believe it? I do not. September, that's one of the things I love about you, dude. I will say, I would be some of the yeast strains that I think might be most effective by that are potentially some of the more expressive yeast strains. I know you have a really solid basis on the Belgian side of things. I think that can be an underrated thing when it comes to Belgian yeast. Now, I'm a big fan of appropriate fermentations, bottle conditioning those beers and whatnot. But yeah. I don't know. I feel like you might be. Well, yeah. I think I can say that with love. I think you are grumpy and stubborn. You have the capacity to be grumpy and the capacity to be stubborn, but your ear is also open too. Srivas, are modified yeast nutrients a big thing in the U.S.? And I'm gonna have to ask you what a modified yeast nutrient is. Yeah, let me know what you mean by that, because I might know what you're talking about, but we just might be using different terminology. Next question is from Bondi Beach Beer on YouTube. Bondi Beach, Channel All-Star. Hey, Adam, do you ever make a starter in a pro brewing situation, or do you just use fresh pitches? Well, my man, over the last couple of years, I have been in situations where I make the pro side starter or the prop batch, right? It is kind of an interesting thing. I know you're on your pub system is on the smaller side. But I think this could definitely work for you. I mean, because the whole idea is you would make there are some easy things to do with this there's some benefits to being on a production type brewery, because you have a lot of work to play with. But conceptually, what you can do is, if you have a smaller tank, so let's say you're a 15-barrel brew house and you have a 3-barrel little bright tank, you could do different things with it. You could package barrel beer, barrel aged beer out of it. You can cut little one-off beers through it or whatever. But you could also rig it up to where you knock a couple barrels of wort into that on like a lighter beer that you make, and then send the rest of that wort to your main fermenter, and then you can buy a smaller pitch, right? So say you're on that 15-barrel brew house. You don't have to buy a 15-barrel pitch. Potentially you can buy like a 1 liter pitch and pitch it into those couple barrels and give it a little bit time to prop, and then you can pitch that into a beer. If you are on the smaller side, I'm trying to remember how many hectoliters or barrels your system is, but if I'm guessing from looking at your equipment, I'm thinking maybe it's around 3 barrels there. So I mean, maybe you would want to run some calculations, but maybe you can get some smaller pitches and run it like in a 5 liter Erlenmeyer or something like that. Cut 3 liters off into something, 4 liters off into something, and see if you can prop that up. It might be a good way to extend that along. But yeah, you can totally do that. I would want to use calculators provided by your yeast supplier, because I know folks like White Labs have things like that. So yeah, man, check it out. Great way to save money. Great way to save money. Back to the chat. Okay. Srivis, I would love for you to Srivis, when he was talking about no, that was not KPAs. He was talking about modified yeast nutrient. And he followed up by saying this: my supplier provides flavor profile and enhancing yeast nutrients that enhance either fruity, sweet, or tropical notes, or noble, herbal, bitter notes, or even just neutral, clean profiles. Dude, hit up a link if you can in the chat. I would love to see what you're talking about. And then September says, so when making a starter on a 3-barrel vessel, I brew a standard gravity beer, let it ferment out, go through the cycle, and then take the bottom part. I don't know. I mean, especially if it's a small portion, if it's just a barrel or two, and I'm just kind of talking out of my ear right now, but I'm assuming that within a barrel and a half, maybe 2 barrels of wort, I would want it to be a similar wort. So you could actually make like the homebrew side starter, right? So get your kettle hot, get hot liquor tank water into your kettle for your 2 1/4 barrels or whatever, or your 2 barrels. Hit it with dry malt extract, a little bit of hops, whatever, give it a quick boil, knock it out into your smaller tank, and pitch that on there. And then really what I would probably do is give it 24, 48 hours. I don't even know if I would just let it get through growth. I wouldn't let it go all the way through. So especially if you're pitching into a very similar wort, I would then just be able to push that whole thing into a similar full batch size wort that I would be making, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. So yeah. Andy, if you end up cutting this one, I'm probably going to want to sandwich that whole thing together. Appreciate it, big dog. Next question is from Larry Foote on YouTube. Hey, Adam. I'm trying to figure out how to handle multiple yeast strains in the brewery. What equipment do I need? How do I schedule different strains? So there's a complex way to approach this and a utilitarian way, practical way to approach this. And I tend toward the practical. What I like to have is I like to have in-house a clean strain, an IPA strain, or something for hazy, and something dry as a backup, right? And so let me flesh this idea out a little bit. So when I was at Cartridge, I had basically a clean strain and a hazy strain. or London 3. I was running London 3 or harvest from imperial yeast. The nice thing is about that is my clean strain was harvest the lager yeast, so I can make all the lagers I wanted. And I could also make basically all the ales I wanted to with London 3. You know what I mean? You're not really going to be hurting too bad when you do something like that. If you want to try something maybe really approachable and really dependable, I would have no problem with saying, all right, I want my clean strain and I want my, something else, like, something to be able to do hazies or something more fruity. I would have no problem with saying, I'm going to run American ale yeast, because with American ale yeast, I could make a cold fermented light adjunct beer that would be just as drinkable and crushable to 95% of the people that are going to be drinking your beer. Then, that's kind of the name of the game, right? You would be able to do that. And then you would have that as a yeast grower for a West Coast style IPA, which would probably pour very well in your place, right? And you can bounce that strain back and forth. American ale yeast is very robust, very robust. You can get a ton of generations out of it. Take good care of it, good cleaning practices, X, Y, and Z, right? The other thing is with, if you have your hazy strain, then you can run all of your ales, all your fruited stuff, all your dry hop stuff. And it can really play well for you. So you're doing a lot of things with just 2 yeast strains that are very robust. Now, I also mentioned dry strains. I did mention fruited beer. Sometimes if I have a fruited beer that's actually going to get like a fruit puree in the fermenter and I'm going to ferment it out, sometimes I love just having that brick or two of dry yeast, like a dry 04, I think is very dependable. If you're just going for a really fruit forward ale to serve, that's a great yeast for stuff like that. You can do it with 05 too, just some clean dry stuff around. And so that way you don't have to worry about repitching it. It's definitely cheaper than your liquid strain. So, that's kind of the way that I would look at it. Now, you can rotate things in. I've done things like that where I kind of have my 2 workhorse strains that get my cleaner styles done, and then maybe some hoppy and some fruitier things done as well. I think that's really key. I think it's a good place to play with temperature, oxygen levels, different things like that. See what you can get out of those. But yeah, I love to keep a little flex dry yeast on hand. Try to stay tight on your yeast practices and your yeast health, and kind of run it like that. And you can bring in some seasonal stuff when you're going to buy a pitch, though, especially if you have to buy a full volume pitch. Plan 3 beers off of it, right? So maybe toward the middle of summer, you want to put your hef up. And then that you can brew Dunkelweiss off of that, which is going to kind of get you into August, September. Things start getting a little more fall-like. People want those hoodies on. They want pumpkins and stuff. You can get that Dunkelweiss at them, and then maybe you can turn it one more time and do like a Weizenbach, right? So it'll reduce that yeast cost, right? So in those times where you are taking a shot on a non-mainstay yeast strain for you, that might be a good way to try to, when you fold those things in, try to plan out 3 uses for them, right? That'll make that cost a little bit easier to swallow. So I appreciate the question. Who was that? Was that Teddy? No, that was Larry Foote. Bro, I'm only 3 questions into my typed in questions, and it's almost 8 o'clock. But listen, we must do what we must do. If there are questions, I answer them to the best of my ability. I didn't say answer them well, to the best of my ability. Andrew, welcome. I don't know anything about that. I would love to read something about it. So feel free to post it. Yeah, the extract would be easier in that situation, September. potentially, because you're not playing with your mash tun and everything like that, and getting, a really small depth bed and weird, rates or whatever. Yeah. So, that barrel, I don't know if, a barrel or two, I don't think it would take more than, 2 bags of extract in order to get you that 2-3 barrels. And then, so like say you have like a pills, right? And or you have like a Belgian beer that you want to prop up a pitch for, right? The day before you could do, or 2 days before, whatever, you could take just the pills extract and make a few barrels of that and knock that into one tank, and then just scale back the size of your original one and build them similarly, and then just probably knock right into that exact same tank too, September. I wouldn't hesitate to do that either. Next question is from Teddy Banks on YouTube. I brew on a 7-barrel system, and I hate how advanced hop products stick to my kettle at the end of whirlpool and knockout. Do you have any solutions for me? Well, listen, man, this is something that I have heard of people having an issue with. This idea that, whether it be like an incognito or any of these liquid hop products that are meant for, whether they be for flavor and aroma or also have the capacity to contribute bitterness as well. I've been thinking about that, and especially when like you're on the smaller side. So I'm on a 7-barrel system. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, well, what if you built out your knockout rig? So you're going from your kettle to your heat exchanger, and then you would normally just have the line to your fermenter. What if, as an intermediary, you put a cleaned and sanitized half barrel that has like a 4-inch cap on it, or whatever. You can pop the top off it and dose things in there. So what I was thinking is if you can limit the amount of surface area that you are allowing to coat with that hop product, that this might be an interesting way to go. Because the idea is that if you think about it, you want all those hop oils going into your fermenter. You're pouring them in, they're expensive. You want to be saving volume by using this liquid form. So maybe what you do is you end up knocking out some hot wort into your half barrel. That's the intermediary. Half of it, 3/4 of it, and then you add the volume of hot product into that, and then close that back up, and you give that your half-hour rest or however long your whirlpool rest is. And so the key is that you need these things to be making contact with wort hot, all right, in order to get extraction. So and then at the end of your half-hour rest, you just turn your cold water on to your heat exchanger, and then you start knocking that out. So you're pushing the hot wort in first. That's extra infused with this thing, and the idea is that there's not as much area for it to stick to. So maybe you actually get more of it into your fermenter. But the key would be is you are going to want to be pitching your yeast after this. You're not going to want that hot wort going into your yeast-filled fermenter. So you will want to be pushing yeast on that once you're a few barrels for sure in, checking the temperature probe on your tank, making sure you're in a safe range for pitching that yeast. But that's a fun little hack. It's a hack. It's a life hack. It might be a fun little, it's a thought exercise by me. I've not done that, but maybe look at doing that. Obviously be careful as you're flowing hot wort into that. Maybe think of ways of rousing that. If you want to get crazy and you had an inline pump, maybe you could gently pump that wort, circulate that wort inside the brink, it's got me thinking about different things. So think on that. Try to get that stuff incorporated. Be careful with hot liquids, and let me know how it works out for you, Teddy. I appreciate the question. I see. Next question is from Raul Righthand on YouTube. I am a pub brewer without a lot of bells and whistles on the QC side of things. I consistently get oxidation back on my competition notes. Do you have any tips or tricks from me? And this is in relation to canning or packaging for competition. So, it's interesting. First of all, Raul, thank you for the question. I think that's the first time I've seen you around. Sonder is the first time that I've been in a situation where I can measure oxygen pickup throughout the process. It's an amazing thing. I also know that with the great canning line that we have, and the processes that we have in place, we have very little oxygen pickup throughout the entire process, and we work very, very hard on it. But most people don't have access to those things. So there is a concept, and again, this isn't earth-shattering or anything like that. I know that unitanking is used a lot more in other portions of the world. I don't think it's as common in the U.S. as it is in some other places. But the idea is that if you are going to unitank a beer, you brew into a tank, pitch yeast, fermentation happens. Usually before fermentation is complete, you would bung that tank with a spooning valve, and you would allow fermentation to complete. You would hard bung that tank. You would get your full carbonation in the tank. You would potentially use a clarifying agent to drop out the beer, and then being able to package right off that one vessel. If you're in a situation where you can unitank and you have sound process, you can more than likely make a beer that has lower DO than if you are transferring from a fermenter to a bright tank. And again, we're talking if you have none of the bells and whistles tools. The other thing that I was thinking about, it might be really interesting to, let's say, for instance, you want to be entering American Amber Ale into GABF, and you have your American Amber Ale, and you can get it bright and all ready to go, and maybe you want it to be at like 2.5 volumes, 2.6 volumes in the can. Maybe you pull off some of that nice clarified beer, and you dose it with the September. If you could do me a favor and Google real quick what that actual bottle conditioning yeast is. Anybody, but September and I were just talking about it the other day. Get yourself a situation where you are putting your CO2 carbonation level in that beer into a calculator. You can figure how much sugar that you need to be adding. Do this all in a sterile manner as possible. And then a packet of that yeast, probably like the 11 gram whatever one, but do like a corny's worth, like a 5 gallon worth. And then maybe what you can create a situation is if you do have a lower tech situation, you can already have a partially carb beer that's clear, and you can use the can conditioning or bottle conditioning yeast along with a little additional sugar to actually bump you up to where you want to be. Again, using a calculator is key. So the reason that I'm mentioning this in relationship to oxygen is this is kind of the last step before they taste it, right? So if you don't have the tightest bells and whistles at your place, that can be an area where you can make up for some error on the oxygen side, where when that bottle conditioning yeast gets active, attacks that sugar in the can, it's going to scrub that oxygen, and it might give you like a little leg up, right? So give those cans some time, cans or bottles, sometimes to come to full carb. Make sure they're at full carb, get them cold. That yeast will settle out real nice and tight at the bottom. And I don't know, it might be a fun way to attack it. It's difficult when sometimes it feels like you're really punching up in some of those competitions, right? Because sometimes it feels like there can be some disadvantages out there. But I think this one, that might be an interesting way for you to approach it, Raul. So keep your chin up and keep rocking, man. Let's see. Yeah. OBP says I would normally leave the beer in a tank at 4 degrees C for at least 7 days. But yeah. And when it's in there, that's a time where you could be pushing up head pressure if you're in a situation where you're not going to have full carbonation by the time you get to your thing. September says in a 5-gallon, use 5 to 6 ounces of corn sugar and a packet of Lallemand CBC yeast. I'm assuming September that is when the beer. What yeast style is that? What beer style is that for? Is that for driving up, like getting something real sparkly, like going from like 1.5 volumes up to 2.5 or 3 volumes? Yes, OBP, I'm here. That's the second part. Indeed. All right, let me see here. Oh, I'm sorry, OBP. I didn't see the first one. It says, "Hey Adam, I'm doing my dry hop and findings in my bright, and finding my dry hop aroma is fantastic at the time I send it through to my serving tank, but within a week the hop aroma is dropping out." Any ideas? Yeah, I would. The number one enemy of hop aroma is oxidation or oxygen pickup. So I would be looking to minimize oxygen in every way possible, whether that be through tank purgings, trying to introduce no oxygen when you're dry hopping, to making sure that all your oxidative sanitizers are fully out of your tanks before. But yeah, that does seem to be a quick cliff that it dropped off. That seems to be it seems to be fast. So yeah, I would guess something along those lines, man. I purge it. What's your purging process like? Do you have a meter? I'm going to jump to this question and we'll come back, OBP. Eric asks, great name. Hi, Adam. Running a small 7-barrel setup. I don't have an HLT yet, so we mash with half the water and then sparge with the second 4 barrels of water. Any rule of thumb for how long to recirculate, mash, and sparge? I might need you to clarify that for me a little bit, Eric. And so you have a 7-barrel setup, and so you're filling up your kettle with 7 barrels, of liquid and then mashing in with 3 and then sparging out with the other 4. Is that what you're telling me? And then it says at the end, any rule of thumb for how long to recirculate, mash, and sparge. Are you talking about the Verloff, like when you're recirculating your mash to get it clear? Pop in with a little more deets, and I can help you out some more. Yes, that is what you're talking about. Okay. So first of all, you might have a little bit of a hard time getting your full volume that way. That can be a little bit tough, and you could be playing some tricky pH games there too, right? I might look at, in a situation like that, you're almost talking about like batch sparging or like full volume mashing or something like that. Yeah, geez, that's a tough one, man. You can be running into pH issues. I would be tempted to drop the entire volume of that water that you're using, that all of that brewing water. I'd be tempted to drop it down to about 5.5 with lactic acid or phosphoric acid, or potentially a combination. But yeah, I mean, that would be my hunch there. So you don't have, so you get your mash done, you Verloff, and then you run the rest of the water on top of the mash to empty the kettle, and then you start lautering over to the kettle. If that's it, that's tough, man. That's a tough situation. You definitely want that. You definitely want that HLT as soon as you can. But I'm just some nerd on the internet telling you to spend several $1,000s. That's not. I'm not trying to come across like that, but it obviously makes it tough. One big batch bar split in half. Yeah, man. I think that's tough. I would be watching your pH on stuff like that. You might have some work clarity issues going into the kettle. So I would look at making sure you have some good kettle findings. But overall, you might just have a hard time getting like as clear of a wort as you can out of that. You know what I mean? If you take pH measurements, I would be looking to, yeah. And I wasn't teasing either, man. I hope, everybody's just trying to get by, and I've been, I've turned a Sabco 3 times in a day to make a barrel. I did that for 2 years. So I'm not like poking fun or anything like that. But those are some of the things I'd be concerned about. So maybe a solid kettle coagulant, making sure that you're using good recommendations there. Maybe getting enough time in that whirlpool to let a lot of that stuff settle out as much as you can. That would kind of be my thoughts on it. And make sure that your pH isn't getting wacky, brother. So yeah. Do I ever run titratable acidity? Leave your sword? No, I don't. But I want to learn about it soon. Yeah, and Srivas is mentioning a good point here. I was thinking about a secondary vessel. I was thinking about it with water, but Srivas was thinking about it with wort. Potentially, what you could do is you could get your full volume of water hot. So get it, say, just for argument's sake, a good utilitarian number, 170 degrees Fahrenheit into a fermenter. Okay. Or in your kettle, and then use half of that to mash in, and then push the other half of that into a fermenter. So then you have your kettle empty, and then you can Verloff in the mash lauter. Start lautering your wort over to your kettle. Verloff for 20 minutes to a half hour, whatever it takes to get your wort grain free. Start lautering, and then pump out of your holding vessel the water, the fermenter, with spray balls open and everything like that, so you're not drawing a vacuum. But then gently pump that back up to your sparge ring in your mash tun. Our heads went two different directions with it. I went putting the water there. He went putting the wort there. But either way, I think it would work. Yeah. Yeah. And Brookside says, I have a similar issue. Have to double our work and fill the kettle the day before as a makeshift. HLT. Been there, man. Been working okay for me. Good. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. And I think you're going to find some, I think you're going to be working out some of that variability once you can get something a little bit more consistent like that, Eric. So good to see you in there. That was my brother's name, Eric. I don't know why that was so pleasing to read. But yeah, cheers to you, brother. Next question is from Charles on YouTube. How do you decide which new equipment investments to make for your new brewery? It's a great question. I approach it much the way I did when I was brewing at home. I remember when I started to have success in home brewing competitions, I would get asked to like go talk at like a home brewing thing or whatnot and give a talk on like my process and what I do at home. And I would start with the slides. I was a history teacher, so I was big on PowerPoint. And I had all my pictures of all my setup and everything. And I always brewed in my kitchen. My hot side equipment was junk. And but where I spent my money was on the fermentation side. Now it was still very low tech, right? But where I put my attention was on cleaning, sanitizing, fermentation, and packaging. That was where I spent the majority of my attention and money on the homebrew side. I think there are some differences on the pro side. You just don't want, you don't want garbage anywhere. But the things that you really want to make sure that you are locking down is you want to make sure that you have equipment and utilities in place to appropriately clean, sanitize / sterilize the equipment that you're working with, right? On the hot side, you want to make sure that it's safe for you. Okay. That's the big thing on the hot side. Please make sure that your equipment is safe for you. Hopefully you can get some jacketed stuff that if you brush up against, you're not going to, burn through 4 layers of skin. But that's where, if I can't afford to make clean beer, quality, clean beer, I can't afford to open the brewery. That's the way I feel. Right. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of bells and whistles. You're going to need some ways to, obviously you need fermenters. You need appropriate hosing and things like that. The appropriate ability to clean, sanitize / sterilize them. I think you need a yeast brink in house. I think it's really nice to have a 4-inch port one where you can take that off and, there's a dip tube version for it. And sometimes there's one where there's like a Sankey valve that you can put in there too, but you can open it up and get in there. That's nice. You need something quality for measuring gravity. You need, I'm a huge fan, especially if you're going to be dry hopping things, grab one of the hot dry hopping dosers that you can put on top of a tank that you're going to dry hop. I think they're great. I think they're great for beer quality. I think they're great for safety. Yeah. But anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I don't love packaging beer. So if you don't have to do it, don't do it. Save money on your canning line, man. It's probably, I don't know. It takes so much labor to run and maintain, and you lose so much beer. I don't know. I would rather invest a fraction of that money on having an amazing experience inside your tap room. Anyways, don't get me going too far down that. But yeah, Charles, that's my take on it. That's just some big picture takes on my part. So appreciate the question. Next question is from Tina on YouTube. How do you handle the challenges of scaling up experimental or small batch recipes? This is a great question. I think there's kind of two answers here. One, sometimes I feel like when a lot of brewers, and there are situations where it's different. If you're on a 50-barrel brew house, if you're on maybe. But I think there's an element of like sometimes gatekeeping where people want to make it sound like what they're doing on the pro scale is so different or so special compared to what we're doing at home. Dude, I've taken homebrew recipes of mine and directly scaled them up on the malt side, and it's been fine. It's worked great. And I will say that there's a difference on hop utilization. So make sure that you're using a good calculator with all of your variables fit into it. You know, if you're doing a hot rest with Whirlpool hops in a 5-gallon container as opposed to a 30-barrel container, that 30-barrel container is going to stay hot infinitely longer than the smaller vessel, and it's going to generate a lot more bitterness. Okay, so there's some efficiency things along that side. Yes, the pro side rig that you are running on might get a higher mash efficiency, higher extraction of sugars. But that stuff's pretty easy, you know, to dial in. But yeah, I will say this. If you have a pilot system, get reps on it, be able to compare it to your other system. But this is a situation where you want to be measuring everything, taking notes on everything, and dosing, right? Taking these opportunities to like take smaller volumes and hit them up with small amounts of acid, different types of acid, see what makes it pop at this level or this level. That's kind of my take on the whole experimental scaling things up. And the other thing is make sure that just because your pilot system can do something, it doesn't mean your big system can do it, that your production system can do it. So don't only use techniques on the pilot that you can actually use on your larger equipment as well, right? So yeah, that's my take on that, Tina. I appreciate the question. Next question is from Wrestle on YouTube. What are the most common mistakes homebrewers make when scaling up to commercial brewing? Okay, so we have a couple of they have some similarities, the last couple questions. One of the things that I'm going to take this a little bit broader. Like I said, I've had a lot of stuff coming in about like going pro, you know, trying to maybe open your own place, stuff like that. So this is another question that kind of falls under that. I think a common mistake that an amateur brewer makes when they're scaling up to commercial brewing is one, a potential lack of awareness of what the new equipment is like and the ramifications of that on the beer. Okay. I think it's really important, and this might sound silly, but listen, there's I don't know. There's mechanics that know how to fix cars, and they know that if this is broken, that this needs to be replaced, this, that, or the other thing. There's two kinds of mechanics. One that knows like why it happened and why it needs to be done that way, and the other mechanic just knows that the new part needs to go in. I think there's that with brewers too. I would really, really encourage you to, if you are if you are thinking about opening your own place as a home brewer, you should try to get some experience on the pro side with the equipment, but also you have to really be chasing it. You really have to be pursuing the science and art of brewing beer, and you have to do that with a passion. Okay, because you're talking about opening your own place. You're not talking about having a job in the brewing industry, right? There's nothing wrong with having a job in the brewing industry. You know how to run your stuff at your place, and you perform at a high level. That's great. But if you want to build that thing out as a career, build your business, you have to be, you really have to be after it. You really have to be passionate about it. I will say this too. I think it's very challenging to be the owner and the brewer at a place. I think it can work, but I would say that it's maybe a mistake is too strong of language, because maybe you need to, get beer in tanks, need to start making money, obviously, before you can hire somebody on. But I think a lot of times people find that they need to hire somebody on as soon as possible. And I think that's probably the savviest move. And I think the best case scenario there is finding somebody that is skilled and knows what they're doing in the brew house, but is also open to having conversations about, like how can we work on artistic concepts together on the recipe side. That would be one thing. How do you, yeah, so most common mistakes homebrewers make when scaling up to commercial brewing. I'm looking at it like that, not so much like on the recipe and whatever side. I do think it's underestimating that stuff and just not getting familiar with what how the pro side equipment works, and little things like not understanding draft systems. That's a big deal. Not understanding how to maintain certain items in the brewery. Maintenance stuff is very important from an equipment standpoint. Those are some of my big picture takeaways, aside from like the nuts and bolts of brewing beer stuff. I think one of the common mistakes too is people don't understand that, like, I do think like founders used to have the motto, we brew what we want, and Stone had something similar. I don't know, man. I think there's something to be said for that, but I do think you have to be nimble. You do have to make what people are interested in. There's beers that pay the bills, and then there's those beers that pay the bills allow you to make the beer that maybe only a few people care about, including you, right? So, and we all have beer styles that we love like that. So. Anyhow, Russell, I appreciate the question. Hey, Dante, God bless you, brother. Dante, a chat champion. What did I just put a star on it? Oh, I put a star on it. What does that mean? I put a star on it. Dante says, love the content. I'm a homebrewer with aspirations. Biggest issue I have is my ABV is always low. OG comes within a point of the recipe, but the final is always about half of expected. Thoughts? Let me reread this, Dante. And thank you very much for the super chat tip, man. Love the content. I'm a homebrewer with aspirations. Biggest issue is my ABV is always low. Okay, so what you're saying is so your original gravity is always within a half a point of the recipe, but you're probably getting a higher finishing gravity. Okay, that's the physics on that, right? It's probably not physics, but you have 1040 going in. So it says, so if a recipe says ABV should be about 5, it comes in at about 2.5 or so. Okay, so that's a really big difference. So one thing I would say is making sure that your equipment that you're measuring with is correct and calibrated. If you're using a hydrometer, most hydrometers are calibrated with like 60-degree Fahrenheit water, and I believe like deionized water or whatever. You want to make sure that that's all floating appropriately and that that all that stuff is calibrated. But if what you're telling me is the case, if you're expecting to get a 5% beer, but you're only getting 2.5, it sounds like you're only fermenting half of what is in there. So is that beer like unbelievably sweet and borderline impossible to drink? Like still tastes like bitter wort basically at that point? I thought you were just saying you were coming in at like a half point low. So you're like, instead of a 5% beer, you're at 4.5. I was also thinking if you're, coming in, 1 or a 0.5% or 1% low on ABV, you could be looking at like a yeast health issue, right? To where you're not having enough or healthy enough or appropriately oxygenated yeast going into that beer. That's another possibility as well. So like for that 5% beer, not sweet, but very yeasty. So I would need to be able to see those numbers, brother. So if you, that 5% beer, I'm guessing the original gravity, if we're talking original gravity, is between 1050 and 1055. And then the finishing gravity, you're probably expecting it to go down to 1012 to 1013, down 1014 to give you your 5%. But if you're at 2.5, you're only going down to 1020. Are you taking a post ferment gravity? And if so, what are you measuring it with? Like the floating hydrometer, a refractometer, or something fancier? All right, Dante, what we're going to do is while you answer that, I'm going to jump on to the next one and we'll come back. All right, brother? Yeah, September brings up a good point as well. Is the sample carbonated? You can pour it back and forth from vessel to vessel to get that gas out of it, shake it, stir it multiple different ways. That's a good one too. But Dante, we'll come back to you, man. We won't leave you hanging. Next question is from Big Knee Pain on YouTube. How do you develop a barrel aging program? So I think this is an interesting thing to look at. First of all, I want to say that I think barrel aging programs, whether they are barrel aged beers, as in spirit, bourbon barrel aged, stout, stuff like that, strong ales, or mixed culture beers, or anything like that, it's really a labor of love. You really have to love what you're doing, and because I don't think it's necessarily going to be the thing that pays all the bills for your brewery. So you want to make sure that you have time and the energy to be able to put into that. It is special. It can help. Don't get me wrong. But first of all, you want to have a passion for it. And so let's stick with like the idea of bourbon barrel aged strong beers or spirits aged strong ales. We're not talking sour beers or anything like that. I love the idea of being able to build up a few different base recipes that you're doing. So if you want to have like a sustainable imperial stout program, all right, I love the idea of saying that you're going to brew 3 different imperial stouts, maybe targeting the same finishing ABV roughly, right? But taking different approaches with them, right? Like different roast malt approaches, different adjunct approaches. So some, you could just go like with no flaked oats, with no, like flake dry, things that are really meant to push forward like the body, the beta glucans, right? Maybe you make some stouts that are a little bit drier, some that are a little bit more bitter, right? And get a few and get them into some really nice wet barrels, and then age those out. And before they're done, I think you're probably looking at least a year in barrel, up to 2 years. Get some more beers going. And then so you're kind of building a library, right? And so you're getting to a point to where you're pulling nails, pulling samples, talking about the strengths of each barrel, and then doing some blending, right? That's one of the cool things that we do at Sonder that I've been able to be a part of. And I think it's a great process, but I think it's really great to also be able to get multiple stout recipes into that, or multiple strong ale recipes into that, because then it gives you more things to play with, right? I'm also a big fan of getting different types of spirit barrels. I think that's a good way to pull some kind of cool diversity into it. Again, always think about what is in the barrel as an ingredient and how it will play with the base beer that you're putting in. But yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what I would do. I would really go out of my way. I would read that fantastic article by Julian Trago in Technical Quarterly for Master Brewers Association, where he talks about his process on the barrel aging side, borderline worth the MBAA subscription price itself. But yeah, big knee pain. That's what I'd be doing with it. And hope that gets you started on the right foot with it. Get digging, brother. It sounds like it'll be fun. All right, we're back to Dante. Dante said, yes, it started at 10:55 and ended at 10:30 with a refractometer before forced carbonation and a carboy that gets sanitized beforehand. Yeah, man. Yeah, and September and June has a good point here. Refracts are not worth anything past hot side, because they don't read once alcohol is created. And calibrate the hydrometer, as he mentioned. Absolutely, he's spot on there. So yeah, man, you're getting 50% attenuation out of this beer. And so really what I would be looking at is pitching rate. What volume of beer are you making? It sounds like maybe you're like on the 5-ish gallon side. I would be looking at if you can only get dry yeast, probably an 11-gram pack will do. Maybe it would need more if you're not getting it there. Also, if I don't know if you're writing your own recipes or not, but I would dial up a blonde ale. Dial up a base malt beer, like a lawnmower beer, make it 4.5%, 15, 20 IBU or whatever, real lean, real clean. And the reason I'm saying is it's possible that your recipe build is heavy on non-fermentable sugars as well. Yeah, that would be a possibility as well. So make sure that get a beer through there that's really primarily base malt. So it should attenuate to 80%, whatever. Get some American ale dry yeast in there, and see what it does, right? But yeah, my two hunches, it's on one of two sides. There's either, this is probably the primary one, it's a yeast health viability situation, or pitching rate situation, or potentially you have too high of a percentage of non-fermentable grains in there. Recipe is one found online, mixed with what a local shop had on hand when I went to buy ingredients. Look at that recipe. Do you know how much of it was like in the Cara-Munich caramel range? Or anything caramel, Cara, anything like that? I'd be interested to know the percentage. Because if you're up around 20%, 25% malts that aren't going to ferment out, like Cara crystal malts, that can really push your finishing gravity up. That could be a culprit as well. Yes, if it is the 100% Carapils beer, it might be difficult. The Oktoberfest had 7% Carapils. Okay, so is there any other color malts in there? So I would not be counting your Munich, your Pils, your Vienna, or anything like that. Just the other things. Roasted barley and melanoid. Do you remember what the rest of that percentage was? Per the grist. See, you're looking at something that maybe you're looking at something that maybe had 10 to 15%, and it still shouldn't ferment like that, man. My guess is and even think about like yeast starter. Yeah, I would dig in on some stuff like that, man. I think that's what you're looking at, is you're actually looking at a situation where your yeast pooped out before they were really ready to roll. Yeah. Okay. So you're up to 17% melanoid malt, roasted barley. Yeah, and maybe you had maybe you hit the really high end of your mash temp as well, as Andrew in the chat. Andrew, welcome. As Andrew mentioned, that can be a factor as well. Yeah, but brother, that's really high. So I would look at trying to get your mash temperature down into the low 150s. Let's put together a beer that has no more than 5% non-fermentable malt in it, something very pale. 5% beer, 20 IBU. Like we said, lawnmower beer. It's probably, well, maybe it's summer where you are. Might be time for it. And get a good robust pitch of yeast in there, right? I think that's more than likely your situation. That's more than likely your situation. And also, I think it would be worth calibrating the temperature probe in that grain father too. So get some liquid in there and get it reading a temperature, and take and calibrate it with a temperature probe that is reliable. Just trying to track down all the things. But Dante, I hope that helps you out. I've noticed my system does not mash on the high side of the temp. I'm going for the next batch. Yeah, dude. Yeah, you're in North. I think you're saying North Carolina. Yeah, dude. Get something light through there, man. Yeah, and Eric mentions too, maybe give it enough time to getting that maybe you didn't have enough time for conversion there too. Yeah, and OBP mentions you can't use a refrac for final gravity. Let's jump back to or did I get him already? Okay, when OBP was talking about earlier, when we were talking about his purge and trying to drop dissolved oxygen levels, he said he typically fills the tank to 1 bar, or about 15 psi, through the stone, leave the tank for 10 minutes, then purge out through the spray ball, all until almost empty, and transfer. I think that you might want to look at amending that process, OBP. There was a great podcast that was done by Master Brewers Association talking about purging bright tanks, and I feel like you might want to go for a lower and slower purge through the bottom of that tank. What size vessels are they? I can't. Oh, you said 500 liters. Crap. I wonder what that is in barrels. If anybody wants to tell me what 500 liters is in barrels. But he was saying, that NBA podcast was saying, put 5 psi through the bottom of the tank for a half hour for every 5 barrels of tank size. And that should get you in a safe area. That worked for me for a long time. I would suggest doing that. So you would bleed through the bottom, leaving the CIP spray ball arm open. And you're probably looking at, for a 15 barrel tank, I would purge. I would purge for an hour and a half with a flow rate of 5 psi coming through my CO2. That's what I would do, because I don't think you're getting an appropriate purge. I can say pretty confidently I don't believe you're getting an appropriate purge through there, man, with that. So I think it might extend some shelf life for you. But if you dig in on that and make some changes, let me know if you feel as if it helps. I'm interested. I am interested. Next question is from Jay Spees, Channel All-Star on YouTube. What do you mean by capturing, quote unquote, capturing CO2 on the fermentation side, or in referring to a video? I had the idea of running a line from the blow-off tube of a late fermentation FV once it is past high Kreuzen to the bottom inlet of a clean and sanitized bright tank and letting it go for a day, effectively scrubbing the tank of O2 using free CO2 from the fermentation of a similar beer. Is that what you mean, or something else? What I meant to be saying is bunging or spunding that fermenting beer. That was what I was referring to there. But I do know that there's people that do that, man, and it's I get it. I don't know. And listen, dude, this is Jay. This is just one of those things where, like, this isn't judgmental. Sometimes we just do things we're comfortable with. I don't think I can do that. And I can't exactly tell you why. Okay. This is a gut. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, maybe if there is a way, like there's an inline sterile filter between it, like I could get down with it. But I'm not saying it would be a problem if you did that either. It's just not, I don't know. It's just outside my comfort zone. I think you could probably displace all of the atmosphere in that bright tank if you caught the fermentation at the right time, right? So yeah, and maybe it's just me being, namby-pamby, like crazy about sanitation and just not understanding things, which is always very possible, right? So Shriva says that volume was a little over 4 barrels in your weird American volumes. You better believe it, Shriva. Listen, man, let me know. You've got the if let me know, man. I want to come out. I'll come out there and try those beers. You're across an ocean. I don't like flying over. I don't like flying, period. But anyways, OBP. I hope that helps, man. I hope that helps. Shrivas, thank you for doing that. So I would say those fermenters that you have, that bright tank OBP, I think you could probably do 5 psi through the bottom of the tank. So you do want to blow some CO2 through your carb stone because you want to clear that too. But then hook up to the bottom of the tank and purge 5 psi for probably about a half hour. And that'll get you in a much better space, I think. Andrew, don't start breaking my brain with these numbers. All right. I'm really enjoying tonight's live stream, but I feel like I'm all over the place. But I'm flow stating it. I know I'm going to go over 2 hours. And I'm excited for my son. My son graduated college and he's got like his first out of college job. You know what I mean? I'm really excited for him, and I'm gonna be hanging out with him after this. So we're gonna bang these questions out, and then I'm gonna talk to my man son. Let's see here. That was Jay Spees. Thank you, my friend. That's what I was talking about. Next question is from Philip on YouTube. Why not just adjust the pH in the kettle after the sparge / pre-boil? There isn't much enzymatic activity going on during the sparge, so the pH shouldn't make much difference during that stage. So, Philip, the reason that I talk about that with my sparge, I had crazy water at that time at Cartridge, and it was crazy high residual alkalinity. And what I found is that it wasn't so much about hitting the pH in the kettle. It was the water quality that I had when I rinsed the mash bed with it. It extracted tannins. Okay. And then I found that when I adjusted the pH of that sparge water down, it didn't extract tannins in the same way. So I wasn't focused on, yes, as an end result, I would be hitting my pH, my kettle full pH. That's great. But the real thing was that I was preventing tannin extraction in the mash. And that was like a hard and fast thing. Like I had blind testers pointed out to me in the first place. You know what I mean? So like it was pretty conclusive between me acidifying that rough sparge water that I had and not. So hope that answers your question, Philip. I appreciate it. Yeah, see, so I've had invites by Srivas. OBP says anytime I'm in Singapore, I need to make an international tour. You know what I mean? Just go out and see all of my Adam Makes Beer people out there. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm looking forward to maybe getting to some conferences this year, next year, maybe, and being able to meet up with some of you guys. I think that'd be wild. Next question is from Carolina Beer Guy on YouTube. I'm super late to this video, but I wanted to ask you a question. Do you attach the doser? So this is the video that I did on dry hopping when I was at Cartridge. You should check it out. I was just talking about a dry hop doser earlier, and they're great contraptions, but there is an ancillary piece that goes along with it, and that fits into this question right here. I'm super late to this video, but I wanted to ask you a question. Do you attach the doser to the tank prior to brew day or attach it on the day you dry hop the beer? I assume it's the former, but I'd love to be able to use it for multiple tanks if that's possible. Looking at buying one and want to make sure it will suit my needs on our 7-barrel system. So I bought one that had a 4-inch port on the bottom and my 4-inch port on the tank was a dry. Well, so those two ports matched. But the key is I bought some 4-inch butterfly valves. And so I would put that on the tank and run my CIP, right? And then when I was done with that, I would put a cap on that. And so that means when I put my dry hop doser on, I take the cap off just so I don't have stuff falling in the open face of that 4-inch port. I can hit that with alcohol. I can drop my hop doser on it, clamp that there, and then I can put my hops in, purge it, put the cap on the doser, tighten that up, purge it, pressurize it, and then open the valve and drop that in. So every tank, I had a 4-inch valve for every tank that I was going to be dry hopping. Okay, I think I had like 3 or 4 of them because I was potentially having 3 to 4 beers dry hopped at any given time. But yeah, so it's just part of your tank build during CIP. So it goes up there when your tank is, when you're cleaning your tank, put it up there, and then hook it up, and then that's the whole idea behind that. So yeah, so if you want the doser, you really have to get the 4-inch valve to go along with it, and then you just build that into the tank, the 4-inch valve, and then you can put the doser from tank to tank, from valve connection to valve connection. So yeah, appreciate the question, Carolina Beer Guy. I was regretting I was going to make like a sound of refreshment, but I was realizing how disgusting that would sound to all of you. Cowboy Brewer, I still owe you a shirt. If you didn't hear from the beginning, listen back and I'll get it worked out. But welcome, Cowboy. We ordered the 4-inch port on our new tanks. Yeah, man. Grab one of those. Mark sells them. 4-inch dry hop doser, boy. Whew. They're the way to go. It's the way to keep yourself from not knocking your ass off of a ladder or something when you're trying to dry hop. Next question is from Slow Down Brewing on YouTube. Oh, what up, Adam? Longtime viewer, first time commenting. I've got a nano brewery in Greece, and I have been pressure fermenting just about every batch. Even when bunging and spunding throughout the entire fermentation, the beer blows off plenty of gas, and so far, at least, I've had no sulfur issues. Would love to see a follow-up video from you on everything you've been doing with spunding and how it's turning out. Cheers. Well, all the way from Greece, Slow Down Brewing, dude. From Greece. Man, we're everywhere. My spunding journey has been interesting. We spun quite a bit at Sonder, different rates for different things. I think it's the best. You know, we spun late in fermentation. You know, in probably the back 25% of fermentation, maybe a little less. That's just a number I came up with off the top of my head. We have a chart for that. I think it's a great practice. I think it's a great way to save CO2. I think it's a great way to save your foam potential in a beer. I'm a huge fan of it. There's a lot of different spunding valves. Some are very expensive. We have some of the smaller ones from SS Brewtech with the 1.5-inch connection. We have like some of their smaller rated ones, and they work great. And we've been running those for a while. So if you're not spunding, dig in on it, man. Make sure you have your standard PRV on your tank, your one up above, and then just build it off your vent arm or spray ball arm. Once it's you can attach that once you're past like the blow off stage of your ferment. And yeah, you might end up getting better long-term yeast health, Slow Down Brewing, if you only do pressurized fermentation in the back half. So if you're not like explicitly trying to suppress esters or anything like that, you're just trying to capture carbonation. You can still do that in the back end of your ferment. But yeah. Yeah, Randy, I think they're the same ones, dude. Like for real. I think I looked the other day and I think they're the ones for the 1 to 3 barrel tanks, they say, and we're rocking them. Yeah, air is air, right? I mean, but yeah, I did find it surprising that there was different sizes. I mean, it either pops off at 10 or 15 or 1 bar or 0.85 bar or whatever. But yeah, we're running the same ones, dude. Yep. So Slow Down Brewing, thanks for the question. And Randy, good to see you in the chat. You too, Cowboy, if I didn't say it to you already. Next question is from Longback Brewer on YouTube. How do you balance creativity and tradition in your brewing? Well, I think that's interesting. I feel like there's a time and place for different things. I think there's a time to make beers that are an homage to a classic, right? Like if you have a favorite Czech Pils and you're literally just trying to make that beer, go for it. Like really chase it, really drive down the process as much as you can and chase that and do that for what it is. I don't have a problem though with the idea of appreciating a technique, an ingredient from another tradition, and finding a use for it in another direction. Okay. Okay, so I was talking to a brewing buddy of mine recently, and I was talking about, maybe like working on like some English styles of beer that are like fusing some other concepts. So if I wanted to make like an English inspired beer, and so what I would mean by that is, so like let's say I would make like a like an amberish, or let's say like a brown ale, like an English brown ale. I don't know, so say for argument's sake, I could use ALDC in it to make sure that I'm not going to get diacetyl. I can spund it, right? I can get full carbonation in the fermenter, and I don't know and that's not traditionally the way that's done as far as cask ale goes, right? I could incorporate German ingredients that I really like into that beer, right? I think things like that are fine. Like, and you could just call it a brown ale or whatever, you know what I mean? But like, I think that there's, what doesn't work for me is I'm not big on cereal and beer, and that's cool. Like, I get it that you can do fun stuff and do wild stuff and whatever. That's fun, but that's like, and that's fun for some people. That's not really fun for me. But then again, I think that, like when we talk about my favorite beers, I just love beer, and I love the practice around it, the ritual around it, the discipline of it, right? So I mean that's what gets me rolling about all this stuff. So I mean, I can say, the beer with a million ingredients is probably not the first beer I'm going to be ordering out of a place. But I do think it's interesting to try to sort out like what the lessons and takeaways are from different styles, and see how you can combine them in new, interesting ways. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it. That's kind of my thought. Again, I think it's one of those things where most of us, are just trying to be able to color within the lines. Some of us get to the point where we might be able to color outside the lines a little bit and still be contributing something worthwhile to what we do. But yeah, part of me feels like there's way too many, some people that are just completely off the canvas. And that's not my jam, but that's just me personally, Let's see here. Hold on a second. Dame on YouTube. We kind of hit on this already a little bit, Dame, but I'm going to give you your own answer on this because I think we might clip it too, but we'll see. Dame on YouTube. I'm days away from my first commercial brew, starting out with a 2-barrel proof of concept system. I'm planning to use PAA for the sanitizer step, for the fermenter CIP, and for final rinse before filling bottles. He talks about the breakdown of the parasitic acid. First, would either of these additional active ingredients impact the accuracy of standard white to purple color change PAA concentration indicator strips? I don't think so, man. I think you're going to be good to go. Second, what concentration do you recommend using for these processes? So we have some, and he says, I want a lower risk of oxidation, but not so low that the risk of infection rises. Thanks a ton. First of all, you always want to, because I'm never sure who the manufacturer is, different things like that. Please make sure that you are using the recommended range that your manufacturer, your chemical manufacturer, is telling you to use. For me, my chemical manufacturer is telling me I need to be at a minimum of 150 parts per million of PAA. I would prefer to shoot for the lower end of that. And as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, and I'll mention again, you want to put yourself in a situation where you can do a fermenter, maybe pressurize it, leave it sealed overnight, and then in the morning blow it out, and you've kind of given that tank a chance to dry. So you're really going to be able to minimize that PAA's ability to oxidize the wort that you're sending into the tank, because that is a real thing. So you're right to be concerned about that. I do have a concern about you rinsing your bottles before filling, because I can almost guarantee that you're going to be stacking up dissolved oxygen, or TPO, or whatever the right terminology is for that in that situation. I know when we do cans, we get them, I believe, they come off the line and they get filled. I almost feel like banking on appropriately stored cans in that situation, which is how they're sold to us, right? Not sticking your fingers in them and leaving the slip cover on them, taking it off and getting them filled. That's probably the best way to be going with it. But yeah, that's my take on that, Dame. And I wish you best of luck with it. Next question is from DMC Serenity on YouTube. Okay, I might be a little slow. You said you only want the hops on the beer. We're talking about a dry hopping video for 24 hours. You stated at the 24-hour mark, you rouse it again, then drop the temperature to 33 degrees and drop the hops each day after the temperature drops to 33. When exactly are you dropping the hops the first time? So the answer to that is it would be the second day. So what I'm saying is I want 24 hours contact warm, or whatever the warmest temperature is when I was using that profile. So the first morning that the beer is cold, I'll start cutting hops off the bottom of that. If you're rousing hops at the 24-hour mark, you're going to have to let the hops settle first before dropping the cone. Yeah, but sometimes you'll find that they can drop again more quickly than you might think. So would that not be another 24 hours of hops? And I was talking about it at a warm temperature, but then again, trying to cut them off the bottom as soon as I can. Or are we assuming that most of the hops are at the bottom of the cone regardless of rousing the hops? Does any of that make sense, or are you overthinking it? No, I wasn't being clear, but that's what I meant by that. So I was keeping that beer at dry hop temperature. I would dry hop, leave it there, and I would rouse it once the next morning. Sometimes I would even rouse immediately after filling, after dry hopping, rouse them up, and then after the 24 hours of hop contact time, that's when I would send it down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 C. And then I would start cutting off whatever I could periodically in the days after that. That's what I was talking about. When I did that, I found that I was getting fruitier flavors through. But you know what? You can listen to a bunch of different brewers, and they all handle that a different way. All right. But DMC, I hope that answered your question, man. I think that was the first question I got from you too. So welcome. Next question. Let me see here. Thanks for being patient with me with the chat, everybody. Interesting. Okay, last sip of coffee. Last question. Powering through. Bondi Beach Beer on YouTube. Hey, Adsy. I have an inline rims element that I can use to hold desired temps when recirculating or vorloffing. Why can we not vorloff for the entire mash time? Why is the rest between vorloff, sparge, and lauter important? Yeah, man, some good questions in there. I think one thing that you want to make sure is when you are allowing the wort from your mash to be recirculated to maintain temperature of the entire thing, that you are not heating that wort too hot to where you might be denaturing it as it's going through there. So, you don't really want to be, too high into the 160s. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna start losing some enzyme there. And there can be some things that are nice about it, maybe especially from a step mash standpoint. That might be the thing. But yeah, I mean, you've been using the system, it works. So that's obviously not a big thing. Why can we not Verloff for the entire mash time? One thing that and I've run a system that could do that. It did have it, but I never used it. That I did recirculate quite a bit throughout the mash. I don't know, man. Like, I'm not super interested in pushing work around a whole lot when I don't need to. And I'm not trying to sound sassy, but like there's also the idea of like, you don't want to be creating shear at various points, right? And you might be hitting some points of diminishing returns, because really all you need to be able to do, the point of that Verloff is to recirculate it enough to where you have grain-free wort, clearish wort going to your kettle, right? And yeah, why is that rest between the Verloff, sparge, and lauter important? I don't know, because I don't think I've ever done one. And look at me. No, I don't know. I mean, maybe you're like allowing the grain bed to settle appropriately, and it might lead to a more you might get better flow through the bed. I'm not sure, but it all sounds maybe a bit nebulous to me. And maybe something that people with only massive systems have to worry about because of the volumes that are at play. I don't know. But that would be my gut on that rims talk and on the Verloffing the entire time. And yeah, so best of luck to you, Bondi. Hopefully everything's well on your side. Well, hey everybody, I've got a son with a big old adult job coming up. So we're going to go out and have a fire and do a little chatting here. So I got to thank you all for stopping in. Big shout out to everybody that subs to the channel, everybody that's a monthly member. Big tip of the hat to, I'm scrolling. Big tip of the hat to, it was Dante, I believe. Big tip of the hat to Dante for that beautiful super chat tip. It's very much appreciated. But you'll be seeing me again soon. Dancing Squirrel Brewing. Good to see you in here. Leave your sword, everybody. It's great to see you all. Remember that I'm going to be back in here talking new and used equipment and kind of all things equipment with Tom Miller of Blickman Engineering. That's going to be on June 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That is a Wednesday. That's next week. So yeah, I think you can, Cowboy. I think you can tip. I don't know how the hell he did it. I don't know how to do any of this stuff, but yeah. So anyways, get ready for that interview with Tom, and hit me up in my DMs, either on Facebook or on preferably Instagram. And hit me up with questions for him and for me for that one. That would be really great. You'll see some stuff posted on my social media stuff leading up to it, and also LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I tend to post that stuff there too. But IG is really the way to go. So hey, listen, I really hope you're rolling into your summer well if you're in our hemisphere here. Or just hope you're doing well. Be good to yourself. Take care of yourself. I've been really working on eating right, and it's borne huge benefits for my mental health, for my stress level, and everything like that. So try to be good to yourselves, be good to your families, and yeah, we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.